The afforestation areas are situated in the West Swale Yorth Island Glacial Spillway, a sacred site in Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. Those who entered into Treaty 6 are the Cree, Saulteaux, and Dakota people. May our relationships with the land, standing peoples, forests, and waters teach us to honor and respect the past and invite us to move forward in harmony. May we all come together as friends to find inspiration and guidance from histories, languages, and cultures which broaden our understanding and community collaboration from the present and future.
Greetings, friends. My name is Sean Sanford Beck, sometimes known as the Green Priest of Saskatoon. The trees of this place are such a blessing for our human and more than human communities. And the Richard St. Barbe Baker and George Genereux afforestation areas are truly hidden gems in our midst. And so I offer this prayer for the trees, for this film project, and for the work of so many to protect our wild spaces and wild spirits. Let us pray. Spirit of creation, you are love embodied in the world. You are a tree of life, and you gather all your children in love. Bless today the green spaces in our midst. Bless the waters and the winds, the soils and the sun. Bless the trees of the forests and all the creatures who find home therein. May you bless your whole creation this day and always, world without end. Amen.
Hi, I'm Hilary Goff, City Councillor for Ward 2 in Saskatoon. It's an honor to be a part of this project, documenting the rich history of the Richard St. Barbe Baker and George Genereux afforestation areas. It was only a few years ago that I personally became aware of this treasure in our city, and ever since I've been so impressed by not only the natural beauty of this place, but the dedication that various members and groups in our community have to preserving these areas, celebrating them and inviting others to make use of them and enjoy them. And while we celebrate the forest and all that it provides, from the natural refuge and beauty to recreation, afforestation areas were hardly the first activities to take place in these sites. And the project is an effort to take a deep dive into the history of this small corner of our city. I'm excited about this because I think it's important. It helps to paint a more thorough, accurate, and interesting picture of our city as a whole, one where Indigenous peoples have lived and thrived for thousands of years, and where communities of all backgrounds have come together to celebrate nature, enjoy what this place in the world has to offer, and to learn a bit about what it takes to live in relationship with this place and with each other. So on behalf of my colleagues on City Council and Mayor Charlie Clark, I want to first extend a thank you to everybody who has spent time volunteering and getting together around these areas to put together this project, and to really do the work to make sure that these afforestation areas are celebrated in our community, are preserved, and that we all have opportunities to learn about them. So I hope you enjoy the film.
On behalf of Meewasin Valley and our Board of Governors and our team, we want to offer sincere congratulations on the 50th anniversary for the Richard St. Barbe Baker Afforestation Area and the George Genereux Urban Conservation Area. We are just impressed when I think about these trailblazers and the namesake of these sites and the significant work that both the city and the Friends of Afforestation have done over the last 50 years to create these really natural and important imperative spaces within our community. I can't help but think about a quote from Helen Keller, which is, "Alone we can do so little, and together we can do so much." And Meewasin, along with Friends of Afforestation and the City of Saskatoon, really are working together for sustainable cities and to enhance life on land and life in the water through our efforts. And we're hoping that by bringing these greetings and really sharing the importance of community, municipalities, and other entities working together, that globally there'll be inspiration from anyone watching this video to get involved in their own local communities as we all work together in these global efforts to prevent or mitigate climate change.
Hi, my name is Julia Adamson, Chair of the Friends of the Saskatoon Afforestation Areas. Trees and forests, meadows and wetlands are all nature-based solutions to climate action. Planting more trees is complemented by preserving and protecting existing green space, trees, and forests. This is but one method to take action locally on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, life below water, life on land, climate action, and good health and well-being. With support from our amazing donors, the City of Saskatoon, Government of Canada, and corporate sponsors, it has been rewarding to move forward on these United Nations SDGs, the United Nations Decade of Ecological Restoration, and the United Nations Decade on Indigenous Languages. An invitation is extended to you to record your wildlife and nature observations on the free iNaturalist smartphone app. This makes a huge difference. Remember to photograph signs of life, including spider webs, seashells, feathers, scat, and tracks, as well as the pollinators, plants, mushrooms, insects, birds, and squirrels, and other wildlife you may see in the afforestation areas. Download the PDF educational packages and check out the online Prairie Forest Guide GPS app for interpretive stories about the afforestation areas for a self-guided tour. Please consider supporting or joining the Friends of the Saskatoon Afforestation Area, a nonprofit environmental charity. Thank you so much to Aspen Films, our director James Hay, those who supported this project behind the scenes, such as the friends and family of George Jenneru, Detective Sergeant Bruce Gordon, and Richard St. Bar Baker, the many archivists, librarians, and green groups, our membership, Reverend Sean Sanford Beck, Green Priest of Saskatoon, St. Andrew's College, along with all of our speakers and presenters who have come together to present the afforestation area story today. And to all the viewers, please come on out to the 326-acre Richard St. Bar Baker Afforestation Area and the 148-acre George Jenneru Urban Regional Park for a wonderful winter staycation day visit or to celebrate summer excursions in the forest. The trees would love to meet you. Thank you.
Hi there. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sylvie Conkin. I'm a school administrative assistant, and I often see our classes go to various locations for their field trips. And as I was introduced to Richard St. Bar Baker Park, I often admired the scenery and the diversity and how many different people access the parks, whether they're biking or walking their dogs. I think it's a great space and it is full of potential for education for students. We have various classes here that enjoy having walks in wildlife and seeing all the different plants and animals that they can see. And it would be wonderful if more students could go to Richard St. Bar Baker because the potential for education there is so vast. The kids seem to really like being engaged and they learn better when they're at place-based environments to learn. And I could just see their passion being ignited, and that's so much what we need, because I remember my sister telling me about how Richard St. Bar Baker said that afforestation is the way to go. People need to be engaged and plant trees, and they become a part of the process of healing the planet. And that's another thing. It's a source for all nations to be able to improve our environment. If the kids could only learn hands-on what what their impact would be if they simply planted a tree or started a little forest in the corner of the schoolyard. They would realize that they are making a big difference. And we've seen lately in our news that we've got rivers and lakes drying up across the planet. And Richard St. Barbe Baker said this would be the source to stop the rivers drying out. It would correct this. And we would see that our decisions are making a great impact once we start planting trees and engaging with nature. And it's such a peaceable, positive way to proceed, to be engaged. And the wildlife there, like wild roses and the carigana, like it's just amazing, the diversity in that park. There's plants that are native to that area, and there's plants that have been brought in from other places across the world. It is just a wonderful source. There's another hidden gem in the city of Saskatoon, George Genereux Park. It's up and coming, and it's a place to go as well. Do not forget George Genereux Park. If one park is busy, please go to the other one. They both have lots to offer. I really, really encourage teachers, administrators, the public, come with your kids, see what this place has to offer. It is a hidden gem, and I really wish that we could see more schools using the parks. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Paul Hanley. I'm the biographer of Richard St. Barbe Baker, and I'm so pleased to be able to bring greetings to everyone in Saskatoon, an area who loves our forestation areas. And one of those areas is named after Richard St. Barbe Baker, and I often think of how happy he would be to know that people in Saskatoon are rallying around an effort to reforest or afforest new areas in Saskatoon to create beautiful spaces where people can come out and enjoy trees, enjoy the community of trees, which is a forest. And I know myself, I spend a lot of time walking through the Richard St. Barbe Baker forestation area, and also the George Genereux reforestation area, and loving it in all seasons. I enjoyed the trails a lot in the winter, and we'd walk through there with our dog. And just the changing nature of the forest was always enjoyable, always different. And we love to see the little trees coming up, clusters of little trees in different areas. And also, I remember one time being there and seeing a full-grown bull moose, which was really exciting. So there's lots of wildlife as well. And these are basically right on the edge of Saskatoon, and probably at some point will be surrounded by neighborhoods and so on. And what a wonderful thing to have this natural area for all of us, including our children and youth, to go visit and kind of get a sense of nature right in the city. So I would really encourage Saskatoon to get behind these forestation areas, to conserve them and to use them, to get out there and enjoy the trails, walking trails, the biking trails, and get to know these lovely afforestation areas. It would warm Richard St. Barbe Baker's heart to know that there was spaces in Saskatoon where he lived for a number of years that are dedicated to conservation of forests and to renewing forests right in the city of Saskatoon. So thanks so much for having me as part of this effort.
Afforestation is the planting of trees where there have been none before. Here at the Richard St. Barbe Baker Afforestation Area and at the George Genereux Urban Regional Park, the City of Saskatoon Parks Department planted trees to create these man-made forests on the prairies. When these forests came to be, they were tree nurseries, but now the trees, fully mature, are much too large to transplant. It was at this time that the intent was that these forests, fully grown, were to become urban regional parks. Under the advisement of the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration, hardy, drought-resistant trees were used in the planting of the afforestation areas, such as American and Siberian elm, Manitoba maple, green ash, poplar, willow, Colorado blue spruce, Scotch pine, and caragana. It is a treat to have these exotic evergreens on the prairies, as they usually grow only in higher elevations. The willow and hybrid poplars were planted in areas prone to flooding. The caragana came to be planted as windbreaks to protect the sapling trees and to collect moisture as a snow collector. The native trees in the afforestation areas are typical of the mixed woodlands, including trembling aspen, snowberry, chokecherry, Saskatoon berry, cottonwood, dogwood, and all 4 species of wild roses, American blackcurrant, gooseberry, buffalo berry, and Amur maple. The Amur maple only occurs in George General Urban Regional Park on the east side. And it is a treat because we're in Saskatchewan, we are used to the very splendid colors of golden yellow in our autumnal months of October and September. If you go to George General Urban Regional Park and espy the Amur maple, you will be greeted with beautiful red colors, just as if you were in an Ontario woodlands. So it is a treat to have a variety of tree species in the afforestation areas. And when you walk in the east side of Richard St. Barbe Baker, it is a totally different forest than the west side of Richard St. Barbe Baker. And it is again different from the center of the Richard St. Barbe Baker afforestation area. And if you go to George General Urban Regional Park, the same thing happens. The east side of George General Urban Regional Park is totally different from the west side of George General Urban Regional Park. So it's like having 5 ecosystems all nestled together in 2 afforestation areas. Quite a delight for an exploration as you walk on the trails in these parks of Saskatoon. Come out and explore them.
Hello, Ani Bonjour and Danse Kinewao. My name is James Young, and I will introduce myself in Anishinaabe with my spirit name. Kiwait Now Kinyu Indigenous from the Beaver Clan. I'm a 2-spirit Métis man with a clear vision for urban, green public spaces to develop harmoniously. I want to acknowledge Indigenous lands and the stewardship that respects all creation on Earth. The word Mia Sin Utta is a Cree word. It means beautiful, tranquil place here. We believe that physical activity in our parks can support positive mental health for everybody. Our parks are very significant to Indigenous and settler history because it's the end terminal of the old bone trail that have been used by Indigenous peoples from time immemorial, later taken over by pioneers and now crisscrossed with highways. This trail used to connect small communities to Saskatoon for the trade of bison bones. The bones symbolize unsustainable, colonial, industrialized resource extraction, with end products being paint and fertilizer, and considered the pioneers' first cash crop scattered through the prairies. The trail was well used until bison were hunted down to extinction in the late 1800s. As a Métis man, I acknowledge my part of Métis buffalo hunters employed by the Hudson's Bay Company with their part in the extinction of wild bison in North America. I'm from the largest Métis settlement in Canada called Assiniboia, or the Red River Settlement, north of Winnipeg, Manitoba. I have Ojibwe, Scottish, and French heritage, and share this home with Louis Riel and Gabriel Dumont, our Métis legends who united Indigenous people, defended Native land rights, and finally commanded a large army in the Battle of Batoche against British Canadian Redcoats, which occurred in central Saskatchewan. I want to offer a friendly reminder that everything around us is in a state of flux. We must listen to and adapt to what the environment is telling us she needs. As people, we are just as diverse as the families of plants who take care of us. There's no linear view of time. Time is a continuous life cycle. Creation has its own time, and we believe our time is now. Just like an infant in the womb, we have inherent knowledge of how to feel safe, protected, and at peace. We must strive for a society based in ecology, contrary to detachment and objectivity. By committing to nature, it fosters deep inner consciousness of health, starting from self, expanding to the community, and now larger to society. As stewards of our park, the Friends of Afforestation are committed to reconciliation as a means of redefining our identities. And I'd like to leave on a quote from an unnamed chief. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. In fact, we borrow it from our next generation who must thrive in the conditions we left them. Chimigwech, big thank you, merci beaucoup, and kinanas komitin, and may favorable winds blow in your direction. Thank you.
Protecting safe, organic forest spaces promotes biodiversity and ecosystems, enabling place-based learning now and into the future. In 1972, actions were taken to bring organic forest spaces around Saskatoon. With proactive conservation and protection measures, the afforestation areas and wetlands can remain as a semi-wilderness habitat and provide physical and mental health benefits for current and future users to enjoy. This is the story of the Wildwoods of Saskatoon.
Well, this afforestation area that we're standing in, which is named after Richard St. Barbe Baker, was planted in 1972 under a forward-thinking plan developed by Parks Department in Saskatoon at that time. They thought that lands outside of the existing area of Saskatoon and the areas that would be needed for future subdivisions could be developed into a green belt.
So the idea of green belts comes to us from England. It was an idea that was popular in the 1950s, and the idea was to build a hard perimeter around cities. And so it could be trees, could be green grass, native shrubbery, even maybe agriculture, but it was going to be a green space outside the city.
So one could say that the beginnings of this actually goes back to 1960. The 60s were a time of expansion in Saskatoon, and two city planners, Bert Wellman and Bill Graham, working for the city planning department, were involved in looking at where a Circle Drive Parkway envisioned at that time would go.
Bill Graham is the guy that stood up at a meeting and said, this is where we're going to build Circle Drive, drew a line around the city. And that's where we built Circle Drive. And so his idea, which came out in a plan in 1960, was that we're going to take a 250-yard strip all around the outside of Circle Drive, and that was going to be Saskatoon's green belt.
And Bert Wellman walked the perimeter of Saskatoon looking for sites of scenic beauty, and that came to fruition in 1972 when this afforestation plan was approved and was implemented. They connected it with what was called the Green Survival Program. The Green Survival Program was started in 1970 by the American Nurserymen's Association, and the Canadian Nursery Trades Association also adopted it. And of course, 1970 was a big turning point in the affairs of the interest in environmental issues. People here in Saskatoon that were developing this program had heard about this Green Survival Program, and they adopted that as part of the umbrella term for what this tree planting afforestation program would look like. So they ordered 200,000 trees in that first planting year from the PFRA Tree Nursery, or since called the PFRA Shelter Belt Center, and planted 660 acres in total. This was the main site, and there was one site south of Diefenbaker Park. And they used a tractor-drawn tree planter, mechanical tree planter, where two people sit on either side of a shear that opens up a trench. They alternated what species they put in to the trench. The tree planter also went in kind of a weaving pattern, so it didn't look like a plantation. It looked more like a natural forest. And in fact, you can only discern that on air photos, that it's done in a weaving pattern. And when you're on the ground, you can't really tell and see that it's all rose. Unfortunately, the program didn't continue as original plan envisioned. They envisioned planting over 2,000 acres, it's somewhere near 2,500 acres. All we know is that the 660 acres were planted. Of that, we know that we have this area here, the Richard St. Barbe Baker Air Force Station area, and the George Genereux Urban Regional Park.
Why does the immediate Saskatoon area, and especially around the afforestation areas, look like they do today? I think the story begins probably about 70,000 years ago with the advance of the Wisconsin Glacier. Initially, when glaciers melt, they create a lot of meltwater, and the entire Saskatoon region was underneath something called Glacial Lake Saskatoon. Once that glacial lake drained through various spillways, then of course that water is gone, and we're left with a post-glacial lake environment. Once the glacial lake had receded, the deltas that were formed by these rivers, dumping their load at the mouth, end up being large sandhills. Both of the afforestation areas are up on the uplands. They're now down on the floodplain. They're not near the river channel, so they are higher up. St. Barbe Baker has a lot of unusual trees, so it is a real gem. It's a magical place, needs preservation.
St. Barbe Baker Reserve was once part of the Old Bone Trail, and that ran from Saskatoon in a southwesterly direction towards Rosetown. And it's the trail that homesteaders used in the early 20th century. In the early 1900s, Saskatchewan was advertised as the last best west. When the settlers come and travel along that Old Bone Trail, the bison are gone, you've got the remnants of these great herds, and it's kind of an exclamation point finding these bones along the trail about one of the great tragedies in terms of what happened to the bison herds, how this once great animal that numbered in the millions is now gone, reduced the bones that are being sold to American companies to make fertilizer. One of the great myths of Western Canadian history is that the bison were wiped out by white hunters shooting from trains. And there's a problem with that story. The CPR didn't build westward across Winnipeg until 1881, 1882. And yet the bison were gone effectively from this region by 1879. So there's a disconnect between the building the railway and when the bison disappeared. And what's essentially happened is that they've taken an American story, shooting by white hunters from trains, and transferred it north and applied it to the Canadian situation. It doesn't fit here. What actually happened in the early 20th century, the major economic activity in this region, dominated by white traders, was the fur trade. And you had fur trade posts across the Northwest, including present-day Saskatchewan. And these fur trade posts were populated by people that ran the post and made sure operations proceeded smoothly. They didn't have time to hunt, so they depended on pemmican. Pemmican was dried, pounded bison meat, mixed with grease, sometimes added with the berries, and it was a kind of superfood because it packed a caloric punch, great energy, and it could last for years. First Nations leaders talked about the bison and the need to preserve them. And the Canadian government, to its credit, does do something. In March of 1877, they introduced an ordinance called the Bison Protection Ordinance in March of 1877. The problem with those regulations is that they more or less came too late. By 1879, the once great bison herds are gone from the Northern Plains, gone from the Saskatoon area, gone from the Old Bone Trail area, gone from the St. Barbe Baker Reserve area. So it is special that this reserve has been set aside and preserved in a natural state, when all the land around them has not only been settled, broken, but you've got the use of herbicides and pesticides. You've got a different environment than what existed a century ago. And so that's what makes this reserve so special.
At a meeting in October of 1978 of the Parks Board, the idea of naming this area after Richard St. Barbe Baker, the naming of the other afforestation area that is kitty-cornered here across Highway 7, the George Jenneru Urban Regional Park, and the naming of Chief Whitecap Park were all approved at that same meeting, and that was forwarded to City Council and was given formal approval on January 2nd, 1979.
At the 1952 Summer Olympic Games, George Jenneru took home Canada's only gold medal at age 17 and was Canada's youngest Olympic champion, a record held until 2016. He was later inducted into multiple sports halls of fame and became a professor and radiologist later in life. Despite a crippling case of ankylosing spondylitis, Jenneru worked to advance the cause of medical knowledge, saying, "If you can't help yourself, you should use your God-given talents to help others."
Richard St. Barbe Baker, who I call St. Barb as his friends did, he had grown up on a farm his father had a tree nursery, and in the large wooded area nearby, St. Barb had ventured into these woods at an age of 5 and had a sense of the numinous of the spirit in nature and felt this deep connection to nature at that time, and developed this sense of deep vision, I guess, about the importance of trees and forests to the global environment and the importance of reconnecting humanity with nature. The organization that he started called Children of the Green Earth. The motto was, "From our hearts, with our hands, for the earth, all the world together." He developed the Men of the Trees as an organization, and it eventually grew in the late 40s to be engaged in over 100 countries. It, of course, has changed its name to the International Tree Foundation, more in touch with the times of today. You can see that he really had a passion for trees, and he really knew how to engage people in a very practical way, and he had this vision of the earth made green through the planting of trees.
So the Fat Tire Brigade is the only known fat bike specific mountain bike club that we're aware of in Canada. And so there's 18 kilometers of trails that are out here now and established and have been for 4 or 5 years. One thing that's really been a success is trying to get people excited and embracing winter. And so that, for me at least, was very important. I'm a winter lover, and this is a fantastic space. We're so fortunate to have it, to be able to come out and enjoy it. The community has been growing. We see it in recreation all over, whether it's hikers or bikers, dog walkers, hoping to culture that these different communities can come together and interact and really have respect for each other and a shared enjoyment of the space.
Be Like Bruce, it came from, it was really in homage to our late friend, Bruce Gordon, who was, he was an incredible athlete, but he was also a family man. He was a Saskatoon police officer for many years, retired from the police service only to take up a law career in his adult life. And so I would always watch Bruce walk around and introduce himself to new people and invite them to come out for training events or, social events just to be part of the group and the community. And so I would often tell myself when I was the veteran of a group and there was a new person to be like Bruce and go and introduce myself to that person and include them. And so that's where Be Like Bruce came from and has really been an anthem for the sort of work we've done in his memory to raise money for pancreatic cancer research and also continue to build inclusive communities.
Really, we're trying to champion and lobby to see this recognized as a formal park, which I don't think has happened yet. So I think all of us would like to see that designation, see the space used for where the community can come and enjoy it. And I think of many cities that would turn themselves inside out to have a space like this right on the edge of the city. So just trying to keep the space as pristine as we can and letting people enjoy it.
Benjamin Thomas Chappell, Saskatchewan CNR superintendent, was a city builder who supported the fledgling pioneer days of the Saskatoon exhibition, which now attracts 1.6 million people. The Friends of Saskatoon Afforestation Areas invite you to be a Saskatoon city builder committed to the conservation and protection of the Chapel Marsh wetlands, forests, and grasslands. Green infrastructures, which, if protected, provide a wide array of benefits to people and wildlife. The areas are excellent places to study regeneration, ecological succession, geology, and First Nations history. The West Swale wetlands are a remnant of the Yorath Island spillway, and this influenced its flora and fauna and Paleo-Indian activity. In these forests, the past meets the present and future. The rich geological, historical, natural, and cultural heritage of the areas honors where we have been. Science, conservation, and hands-on learning about the land, the environment, and sustainability ensure our future. We therefore honor those who were here before us, who called this place home, and protect these places for those who come after us.
Thank you for being with us tonight. We would just like to mention that quite a few of the people that were involved with this production were mentioned in the credits that we just saw rolling on the film. And we would also like to say a special thank you to James Young, who brought Indigenous greetings and acknowledgements to the film, which is very much appreciated, along with Hilary Goff, Andrea LaFond, Sylvia Conkin, Paul Hanley, and as well as in the documentary were Robert White, Jeff O'Brien, Bill Weiser, Reagan Waldeman, Jeff Hain, and Bill Weiser. So it all came together very well to tell the story from the beginnings 50 years ago, and even in the Pleistocene era, to where it is today with community involvement. And now we'll head into the question and answer session of the video. And one of our first questions coming in tonight is, out of the many global accomplishments, which are documented by Richard St. Barbe Baker, which one would you highlight? And we'll let Robert White answer that one about Richard St. Barbe Baker.
Which of the many accomplishments of Richard St. Barbe Baker? Well, I mean, his completely networking capacity at all levels of society, which he practiced all through his life from the 20s to his death, was really kind of part of his secret sauce. You know, that he knew the king and queen and Prince Charles and had informal events with them. And he was very at home in people's homes around the world, in villages and spiritual communities, in ecological communities, environmental groups, presenting at Congress in the US. Audacious in his ability to do any of those things. Fundraising, as he did for the Redwoods in the 30s. And certainly that would be a centerpiece of his love, would be the Redwoods. He visited there 20 times over his lifetime and raised money during the 30s even for their protection. And his work with the Sahara, I think, was a very audacious activity to take this on. The reclamation of the Sahara Desert was beyond anyone's imagination, but it is actually something that is now being partly realized through this greenbelt planting across the Sahel region of the Africa. So he was ahead of his time, and he sowed these seeds. His vision was momentous, and he believed in our capacity to pursue these objectives. But it's a matter of human beings taking up that will, and we can see across time that current environmental events are, really forcing us to plant more trees and do all the things that he recommended. So in terms of climate change, which he anticipated in a general way, and knew that forests were part of rainfall generation and sites. So that's why he recommended agroforestry and so on. And really, those would stand out for me. I hope that answers your question. If you have any further follow-up question, please go ahead.
Thank you, Robert. That was an amazing answer. Richard St. Barbe Baker was quite the visionary. I understand that when he was in Africa with the Kikuyu tribe, he had some forest scouts and they had to take a pledge. Do you know more about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was working in the colonial era, but he had a sense of equality with the Kikuyu people, but still he used some kind of, I guess, authority in the sense that he had this idea kind of based on Baden-Powell that, working together as a group, and he recruited these young warriors to be, the first men of the trees, and Watuwamiti in Kikuyu language. So he had them pledged to plant 10 trees each year and to protect trees everywhere and to do a good deed each day. So again, the Baden-Powell Boy Scouts analogy. So, but he always had this moral or spiritual dimension to everything he did as well. So there are the good deeds. Like he had, the idea of having a good character was important in everything.
Thank you. Every once in a while, I hear the afforestation areas being referred to as laboratories in ecological succession. What does ecological succession mean, and how does it apply to the afforestation areas?
Well, they were planted to these tree species that were mentioned, and of course, nature abhors a vacuum, is one of the sayings. So normally in a tree-covered landscape, you have all kinds of understory, both shrub layer and herb layer, and mosses and all the rest of it. So, some of the invasive species also moved in there, like brome grass, but eventually the trees, their seedlings started to grow up, and then other plants that are normally under forest cover, and plants like wild rose and that type of thing, that are shrub layers, came in, and then even a species, some protected species that are quite rare in this region, started to grow. So, a type of lady slipper, for instance. So it's just gradually filling up with more and more diversity and more species. And this is still changing as time goes on, because it's different in different areas of the afforestation area as well, because where there's a lot of conifers, the conifers are coming back in mass, and they will eventually dominate and squeeze out the deciduous trees. But where there's the only deciduous trees, the succession path will be different.
Thank you. That explains it very well. Much appreciated. And you even answered another question that was in about the baby spruce trees and what might happen with them out in the afforestation areas. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? I think I'll just check. I'm looking at both Zoom and at the YouTube live session, and I just don't want to miss anybody here. So just give me a few moments.
So speaking of Richard St. Barbe Baker, does everybody know that there is the other film we did a year ago that focuses on Richard St. Barbe Baker, and it's also on YouTube.
And what's it called?
The Secret Forest of Saskatoon, or
Thank
the Hidden
you.
Forest. Which is it? We were debating the name.
Right. I think we'll be having a screenshot from our director on the screen soon about that as well. Oh, it looks like maybe.
The Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest. And
There
James
we
has got
go.
it.
There, now it's coming on the screen. So yes, the film was the Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest. And just give me a second here. Sorry about that. So from roots in Saskatoon, Richard St. Barbe Baker went on to inspire tree planting and forest protection around the world. The International Tree Foundation, which he founded in 1922, is still active in 14 countries. Countless people motivated by him are environmental champions today. A companion curriculum describes his holistic worldview and his daring life of action on behalf of the earth. So the companion curriculum is good for the general public as well as for schools, and it was written by Elizabeth Beckley and illustrated by Kevin Wessequate, which we are very appreciative of. And Aspen Films produced the film Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest. So it all came together very well to bring in some place-based learning. And since then, we have partnered with Saskatchewan Polytechnique and some students in their computer technology program to make the Prairie Forest Guide, which is a GPS self-guided tour for your smartphone. So you just have to type into your smartphone browser, pfg.friendsareas.ca, and as you walk along, you'll be a little white and blue dot on the screen. And as you come to an interpretive sign, it will light up and you can click on it for an interpretive story as you're going through the afforestation areas.
Just a note about the Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest. It's also a film that's about 14 minutes long, but at the launch we had people from Australia, USA, and England, and European continent that all were either worked with St. Barbe Baker or were inspired by him, and gone on to do, be conservation leaders in their own right. And they were all gave little segments that were in their interviews, and then we had a live question and answer after with myself and Hugh Locke, who is the executor of Richard St. Barbe's estate. And so it's got a lot of interesting information and background information, stories about St. Barbe and his way of doing things, as well as the footage in the film from Mr. Richard Chapman, who started doing a film on him in the 60s and 70s, so and other historical footage. So it's quite a good package.
Where Robert White and Paul Hanley and the other people in the Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest actually knew Richard St. Barbe Baker, I didn't know Richard St. Barbe Baker. So it was quite a treat to not only meet all these people and have Robert White present with us today, but to also see Richard St. Barbe Baker come to life and be speaking and talking during the Legacy of Saskatoon Secret Forest. His bonds are at the University of Saskatchewan in the Special Collections and Archives. And there's boxes and boxes to learn more about this first global conservationist. He really was a true visionary. I'll just say a couple words also here about Benjamin Thomas Chapel. He's the namesake for Chapel Marsh, and that's in the Richard St. Barbe Baker Afforestation area. And Benjamin Thomas Chapel was the CNR superintendent for Saskatchewan. And as such, he was able to help the Saskatoon Prairie Land Exhibition one year by helping them out with use of the roundhouse. That was part of the CNR, sort of where River Landing is right now. And a roundhouse is how the train engine would turn around to go from driving north to south. And there was the one time where the Prairie Land Exhibition could use this facility for the fair. And then he also accommodated people from out of town to come into Saskatoon for the exhibition. Because when the Prairie Land Exhibition started, it was a time when the farmers could bring in their special livestock or their pies and baked goods and show them and get prizes. So it was a time at the beginning of the 1900s. So not too many people had like motorized vehicles. So having this special accommodation by train, taking them into the city in the morning and taking them back to their towns in the evening, really made for a great success for our Prairie Land Exhibition and helped pave the way for what it is today. And in the film, you met a little bit about George Jenneru and the namesake of George Jenneru Park. And we spoke a little bit more about Richard St. Barbe Baker. And it was very nice to have people speaking to Bruce Gordon and have pictures from his family for the film and commemorate the notable namesakes of the afforestation areas in that way. We do have another question coming in. What is Richard St. Barbe Baker's connection to Saskatoon? Does he have a historical connection to our city?
Yeah, he has many connections. He, as a young man, he was recruited by Bishop Lloyd George to come here to study at the fledgling University of Saskatchewan. And so he came in 1909 and then enrolled in the Anglican College at that time. And he completed his degree, a 3-year program, in religious studies, because he'd grown up in quite a religious family and of Anglican persuasion. But his father was quite open-minded and related to many different faiths. So that was how he ended up here, and he took out a homestead near Beaver Creek, and he worked in a lumber camp near Big River, and that's actually where he decided to become a forester, because he saw the waste and the harvesting of trees at that point. And he'd also worked and saw plowing the land, so that had influenced him in terms of the effect of plowing up native prairie and how that affects the soil degradation. So he had all that information with him, inside of him, when he went back to England with the idea of studying forestry. But then World War I came along, so he ended up serving in the war and is actually named by the University of Saskatchewan as one of its veterans in terms of serving in the war. And then he studied forestry, went on to work in Africa, and then he traveled around the world many times and traveled through Canada. But it was in the I know he had a link with the president of the University of Regina, Mr. Archer, but it was through his being awarded an honorary doctorate here at the University of Saskatchewan in 1971 that he came here and spoke at convocation. And actually, he knew the chancellor of the university, John Diefenbaker, because John Diefenbaker was a freshman when St. Barbe Baker was in college here. So he had initiated John Diefenbaker, and they had a lifelong friendship. And then I guess they both broke out at the convocation in the University Yell from back in the day. and so after that, St. Barb Baker had a friendship with Dr. John Spinks, who was the president of the university at that time. And he visited Saskatoon several times after 1971 into the 1980s. I think 3 times he visited, and also some footage was shot for the film here that was Christopher Chapman was going to do. And then he wanted to come back here in 1982 on his world trip. He'd been in New Zealand over Christmas and came to the Redwoods for dedication of the Redwoods Heritage Site, and then wanted to come here for convocation again and to meet all the people. He'd set up a prize at the university for called the Men of the Trees Prize, and he wanted to meet all the recipients. I was the first, so he invited me to come from Toronto to meet him here. He was delayed because of his health, but he eventually made it here using oxygen on the plane to get here. And the Baha'i community of Saskatoon arranged a tree planting on the campus of the university right near the Diefenbaker Center. And that happened on the June 5th, 1982. And his planned flight to go on to Toronto was with me on June 9th, but he died that morning as we were getting him ready for the flight. So he is buried here in Saskatoon at Woodlawn Cemetery. He was a Baha'i, and that precludes being transported more than an hour away from place of death. So he was a world citizen, but he made a heroic effort to come back to Saskatoon many times, and especially on his last time, and to be buried here. So there's some significance in that, I think, in that his archives are here, he's buried here, his last tree is planted here, and it stands by the Diefenbaker Center, close to where John Diefenbaker and all of Diefenbaker are buried. So there's quite a lot of synchronicity in all that.
Thank you. That's good to know. I don't see any more questions or comments right now. Please feel free to email us if you think of something after the film. We wish to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and have a great evening, and please enjoy the afforestation areas. They're just on the southwest edge of town, just by the CNR Chapel Yards and by the Civic Operations Center and Bus Barns in Cedar Villa Estates. So come on out. The trees would like to meet you. Good night.
Good night.